In chess, we know that opening is very important to study modern theory, very important to know the end games, and you must know the strategy of the game. But I think the most important in chess is to know tactics, tactical shots, preparations for combinations, sacrifices, because without them there is no game of chess. Every game you can see played on a decent, reasonable level has tactics. There is no game that has been played yet on reasonably high level that went without tactics. That's not necessarily the tactics that you see being played on the board, but it's a possibility of the tactics and avoiding them. You may not see combinations played on the board, but you may see one side or another played some move to avoid certain combinations, or played some move to set up a certain trap of the tactics or combinations, and the other side is avoiding them. So this is very, very important. And very frequently I was asked question, how do you learn tactics? There is no book that tells you that's the way you learn tactics. There is a book that says how to learn openings. There is a book to say how do you learn end games. But about the tactics, you should learn themes, motifs for the combinations, how to avoid them, how to set them up. And every combination, most of the combinations, I shouldn't say every combination, has themes for it, has reason why this combination or another work. Now, let's divide combinations on several different themes. And if you get a book on the combination, you see the combination on a pin, on a weak 7th horizontal, back rank mate, or double attack or deflection. There are lots of them. You have to learn them all, and most of the combinations have those themes. Now, if once you learn them all, intuition will tell you how to detect those combinations. What I mean by that is this. Here is one example we have on a board. You see that black's king has no move. So the white can by force checkmate black in 3 moves. You see, if white plays queen takes g7 and black plays rook takes g7, now I want you to see rook takes g7 would have been a mate if not the queen on b7, which can capture white rook. So the reason why this combination doesn't work is because the queen on b7 protects the g7, queen on b7 protects the g7 square. So what we have to do, we have to coordinate our efforts. So mate on g7, g7 is a 1 key square, and the other rook c8, that would have been a checkmate if not black's queen. So we notice that black's queen is overloaded. Now, this you have to have, once you see a lot of those combinations, you will be developing intuition. And intuition tells you right away, your eye immediately catches the g7 and c8. The next game I want to go over to, it's very interesting by the originality of the combination and tactical shot. E4, D5, ED, knight F6, D4, knight takes D5, knight F3, bishop G4, bishop E2, knight C6, C4, knight B6, D5, bishop takes F3, bishop takes F3. This is all opening stage. Knight E5, bishop E2, and black played C6. Obviously, you cannot take on C4 in this position because bishop takes C4, knight takes C4, queen A4 check, and white wins the game. So black played C6. Now they are attacking D5 pawn, and they are attacking the C4 pawn. Queen to D4, attacking the knight, knight to G6, knight C3, and black played E5. This already happened in my game several times. Queen to E4, C takes D, C takes D, bishop to D6, bishop B5 check, knight D7, white castled, and black castled. Now this position will be great for black if they can manage to play F5 next move. So then they're going to have very strong position in the center and have, after queen moves, the central pawns keep moving. So white played queen F5. And after knight C5, B4. Now, but is it good for white to keep their queen on F5 as a blockading piece? No, queen is not a good blockading piece. Knight A6, A3, knight E7. You see, that's why queen is not good blockading piece. Now queen has to move. It's attacked. Queen H3, knight to C7, and bishop to D3. And finally, black played F5. Black has a great position now because they have potentials of going E4. After F5, white played bishop G5 and E4, bishop C4, and H6. Now, white has to move the bishop on D2. Bishop takes H6 is definitely insufficient compensation for white because queen takes H6, queen E8, and white is queen E8 is not good because bishop is hanging. A simple rook F7 will give black totally winning.
Hi, my name is Gina Gonzalez. I'm a student of Roman and a chess fanatic. Grandmaster Roman Djindjihashvili, a Russian and a US champion, is continuing his widely successful Mastering Chess DVD series. This private lesson will further enhance your positional skills. Your better understanding of pawn structure and maneuvering will result in more wins and a higher rating. So sit back and enjoy your private lesson.
To become all-around strong chess player, you need to be very good in tactics and the strategy. Knowing tactical shots and maneuvering in the chess positions, in various positions, is very important. Knowing opening theory is very, very important. But every part of the game, every aspect of the game has a lot to do with the pawn structure. And subject to our discussion is pawn structure. Pawn structure is the most important part of strategical planning. Without correct pawn structure, you cannot get healthy positional game and you cannot construct good strategical plan. Okay, let's start discussing pawn structure. Everybody knows and the number one thing you learn about pawn structure, it's good to have connected pawns, and it's bad to have double pawns. It's good to have less pawn islands rather than more pawn islands. It's better to have less pawn islands. Well, that's not only, this is all true, but there are a lot of exceptions. Concept of double pawns is very, very difficult concept. But before we get there, let's discuss some kind of fixed pawn structures. What I mean by fixed pawn structures or frozen pawn structures, for example, e4, e6, d4, d5, e5. You see the pawns in the center, they are kind of frozen, and you don't see the structure of the position in the center changing in near future. Well, another type of pawn structure, the frozen pawn structure, is e4, c6, d4, d5, for example, e takes d, c takes d, bishop d3, knight c6, c3, knight f6, and bishop f4. You see, it doesn't look like black can go e5 anytime soon, and we have kind of fixed pawn structure. White is not planning on playing c4 either. So this is kind of pawn structure that will remain the way it is for a long time. Now, understanding where are the plans, where one side is playing on this position and where the other side is playing, what are the plans? Generally, these positions, you can determine what side you have to play on by looking at the pawn structure. You see your pawns on b2, c3, and d4. They are placed on the same diagonal, and they are going towards the king side. So white's play is on the king side. And black's pawns after e6, f7, e6, d5, aiming towards the queen side. So black's play is on the queen.
Hi, my name is Gina Gonzalez. I'm a student of Roman and a chess fanatic. Grandmaster Roman Jinjihashvili, a Russian and a US champion, is continuing his widely successful Mastering Chess DVD series. This private lesson will further enhance your positional skills. Your better understanding of pawn structure and maneuvering will result in more wins and a higher rating. So sit back and enjoy your private lesson.
Regardless of your style in chess, whether you like open tactical positions or closed positions, even if you are a tactician and you really like open positions, it's not gonna always work that way. Sometimes you're gonna end up in positions that with a lot of pawns on a board and very strategical. So if you don't have skills playing relatively close positions with maneuvering, you're not going to go far as a chess player. So what I would like to discuss now is essentials of positional maneuvering, planning, and when you cannot calculate and evaluate position based on I play this move, he plays this move. You have a plan, and there are certain rules that apply when to determine who has a better position. And when you have a plan, a certain plan, you follow this plan, and you know you have to maneuver this knight from this square to that square and maneuver your king. And planning on maneuvering and art of it is inseparable part of a chess game. Without mastering in it, you cannot do much, really. When we talk about positional maneuvering, we are not talking about understanding position, what positions are good and what positions are bad for us, or like evaluating when we have a good bishop versus bad bishop of the opponent and what pawn structure is good. No. When we talk about maneuvering, of course, understanding of the position has to come first, but then you have to know how to play certain position, how to play, what plan to build, and how to maneuver pieces to make a progress in them. This is absolutely essential and very important. Without it, your chess game is not on a good level. So when we talk about positional game and positional maneuvering, we cannot bypass the, I would say, the father of the positional maneuvering, and like a guru of a positional chess play, Tigran Petrosyan, former world champion, now deceased. Let's look at some of his games and let's see how simply, how perfectly he executed maneuvering part, having small positional advantage. Of course, when he was executing it, that was like it was like his invention and his art on his part. Now, every strong super grandmaster, they all can perform the same way because it's already developed that much, and that they can do it by learning it. Well, you learn, it's difficult to invent, it's a lot easier to follow, and they all master in it. So for you, it's necessity, absolute necessity, to know it and to be able to make a progress in strategical closed position and master in maneuvering.
Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili. For years already, I'm promoting some openings that for weaker to medium to even for strong players that gives white some positional advantage. So we are shooting not for immediate crush in the opening, but for the openings that are based on very solid and healthy strategical plans. So I had multiple requests on explaining some positions in the end of the opening that we frequently say, okay, and here we're going to end because white has good size advantage. But the requests I get is to explain how to play those positions. Those positions don't win by themselves. If you had winning attack on opponent's king, that's a lot easier because winning attack, you know what you have to do. You have to go and try to checkmate opponent's king. And this is a lot more straightforward than playing with certain positional advantage. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to try to explain some positions that we get from after our opening is finished, and then we get to the middle game, how to play those positions. This is going to be extremely helpful for you to study, even for those who don't play these openings, because it's not about the opening. It's about the strategy of blockaded position. Once you blockade and once you determine weakness for opponent's pawn structure, how do you take advantage of it? You will see dynamic and static aspects of the strategy, and basically I will do my best to make sure that you will be very, very successful once you reached those positions. So first, I want to talk and analyze some blockaded position from our repertoire in Scotch Gambit or two-knight defense, knight f6, e5. We are not going to be discussing here opening part. We're going to be discussing positions after the opening. Castle, bishop c5, knight g5, f4, knight e4, and bishop e3. Now, this is probably the main position of whole opening and most important position. And here we have to know exactly what we are going to play, how we're going to play it. I have to point, before I make these moves, I have to point that, well, after f4, knight e6 will result with c3, and white gets different type of advantage. There will be no blockade, but there will be very strong attack on the king side. But that's not what we want to discuss now. If you want to look at it, you should pick up a copy of my DVD on the opening. So we are discussing position with knight e4, bishop e3, castle, knight d2, knight takes d2, queen takes d2, queen e7, knight b3. That's the beginning of blockade. If black takes, this is going to be a terrible position for. Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and this video is about importance of a pawn structure, something we already had, but in completely different aspect. We talk about going for worse pawn structure in exchange for some other benefits in position, such as maybe king side attack, or queen side attack, or maybe for some other dynamic activities. So we are not going to be touching the material subject. So like not getting pawn structure for a piece, for extra pawn, but strictly based on position. So sometimes you do want to go for attack. You want to attack your opponent. But it doesn't always happen that you can do that without making any damages in your position. And sometimes you create weaknesses, maybe even sacrifice a pawn. But we're going to be talking about when is it worth to making sacrifice in a pawn structure to get some other positional advantages. So first I want to bring you several games when one side has some positional deficit in a form of a pawn structure, and what do they get for it. And I want to start with a couple of examples of exact same pawn structure, exact same opening, and two absolutely conflicting results. And you see how one tiny move order can make huge difference. We're talking about accelerated Draken, something I covered many times before. Knight f3, g6, d4, one of the main positions of accelerated Draken. Bishop g7, bishop e3, knight f6, bishop c4, queen a5. And again, I want to mention, I'm not going to go into details of theoretical discussions. No. We talk about, you should concentrate on this video strictly on the pawn structure. d6, h3, and now bishop d7, queen d3 is one of the main moves, rook fc8, and this position happened multiple times. I want you to see a difference between move a3 and rook fe1. Now, it looks like it shouldn't be big difference between these. a3 is a good, useful move to stop in the future black knight going to b4, or maybe even after a6 and b5 black plays to stop b4. So in general, it's a useful move. But here you're going to see a huge difference between them. Now black can go knight e5, and after queen e2, black will make the best move in this position. Actually, I played this position a couple of times myself. That move that looks like disastrous, terrible move, highly anti-positional, and absolutely unsound. Queen a6 move, and you see this pawn structure that looks terrible for black, but in reality Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and this is the DVD about tactics. Now, for years I was wondering, how do you make DVD on tactics, on combinations? Do you just show combinations? But that's no fun, because you can do that by look at combinations opening any book. Then what? Explaining combinations? That makes a lot of sense. But how do you explain combinations? And how do you help someone who needs help in tactics? A lot of people asked me in past, in many years, for many years already, how do I get better in tactics? And I always had difficulties delivering this message, answering this question properly. I will try to do my best now on this DVD. Combinations, mostly one and the most popular way of learning tactics, also the easiest way, it's by pattern recognition. I mentioned it several times on previous DVDs. And what is pattern recognition exactly? Pattern recognition is when you play combination on some team. It may be attack on the king, it may be a double attack on the pieces, winning material, getting positional advantage. They repeat, they have tendency to repeat the themes, not exact positions, but themes. So once you played one combination or saw some combinations, you will recognize this appearing in your games. But now when you see the theme that you have already seen, that doesn't mean your combination is going to work. Because remember, I don't know if you guys know that most of the combinations, big majority of the possible tactical shots, they don't work. I would say almost 70% they don't work. And then you have to use your calculation ability
and so on and so on. And then that's how you determine if combination works. Now, let me show you some tactics that have very good pattern and very good explanation. Well, some tactics you can explain why this was possible. And there are some tactics that are absolutely unpredictable, and they are a lot more difficult. But we will get to it in a little bit a later stage of the DVD. Well, for example, I will give you one simple thing here. Well, suppose somebody goes knight c3, queen e6 check, and you go bishop e2. Suppose they go queen f6. I'm just making it up as we go to show you. Here, you immediately can recognize, you probably went to some exercise in tactics, that move like this wins a queen because it forces queen on b5 and knight takes c7. This is a theme. This is tactics that you can explain easily and find easily in your game. But then there are different kinds of tactics that make little more sense. For example, e5, knight f3. I will show you, there are millions of examples. I cannot even get close to exhaust the possibilities of thematic combinations. But I show you some of them from my opening repertoire that I recommend. And this is going to be interesting here. Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and this is DVD about one of the most important aspects of positional play. Or we should say, one of the most important aspects of the game of chess. So, the theme of our DVD will be very strong outposts and taking advantage of a powerful knight against poor bishop. We have had a couple of DVDs where we discuss it, but this is going to be only about power of knight versus bishop in certain positions and how to play those positions. And without, I have to point that, without mastering in that, you will never, nor anyone else will ever make good chess player, will never make reasonable chess player. So let's start talking about it. It was very difficult actually to select games and examples on playing with a powerful knight versus bad bishop. Sometimes it's difficult because there are not too many examples. In this case, it's the opposite. There are thousands of examples, very good examples, but we had to take most important ones. The way I selected examples for this DVD is where we have this powerful piece in the center and how to use it, and showing it in a few different aspects of it. Using it for attack, using it for positional play, using it for endgame, and that's what I am about to start talking about. Here's the game. It was played in the year 2000 between two masters. They're not very famous players, but this is two masters. They are good enough to show us how to play the game, or in this case, how not to play the game. Game was not won by white, but white's position is completely winning here. Completely winning. They have this dominating knight, an open file, versus absolutely dead bishop on c6. Let's see what happened. In this position, it's black's move. Black played a6, king f2, rook e6, and here white played move that has absolutely nothing to do with this position. They went g4. Well, in order to know why this is such a bad move, I have to explain this position. In this position, white has advantage of a super powerful knight, and they have c-file. All their actions should be conducted on the left side of the board from the center, from the e-file to the left, which meaning center or the queen side. So any action on king side would be wrong. Rook c3 would have been one of the good moves. g4 has nothing to do with the position and has potentials of black bishop on c8, which is at this moment reminds more of a pawn than a bishop. Now it has potentials of coming up alive. So g4 is absolutely bad move. And after g4, it's almost clear that white is not going to win. Not because after g4 they still have very big advantage, but it's clear that white is on the wrong. Hello, my name is Roman Djindjihashvili, and this is the DVD about positional sacrifices. So it's part of a series of positional school and something that everyone has to be familiar with. Well, not everyone, just competitive player and players that try to get better. So about the positional sacrifice, let me tell you what kind of a sacrifice I'm talking about. I'm talking about kind of a sacrifice that not big sacrifice. What I mean by that, when you don't sacrifice, for example, queen for a knight, this cannot be positional sacrifice. Queen for rook cannot be positional sacrifice. Queen for rook and knight may be positional because material is not too much different. So queen doesn't have that big of a difference against advantage against rook and a minor piece. Or an exchange sacrifice, rook for a knight or rook for a bishop. Because then you have to have some positional sacrifice to justify this minor deficit in material. When you sacrifice rook for a pawn, for example, you have to look for a mate or for a queening. So, and there are different type of positional compensations for small material deficit. And there are different kinds. For example, you may have two bishops, you may have pass pawns, or you may have very strong potential attack, strong center. Let's look at some of them. I think you should have a pretty good idea. We cannot cover all aspects of positional compensation on the one DVD, but you're going to have a pretty good idea what kind of a sacrifice I am talking about, what kind of a compensation, and we can go from one example to another
and I'm gonna try explain it and justify it. First example, the game was played just a couple of weeks ago in Russia between two world famous grandmasters. Ponomarev was white and Peter Svidler was black. Very, very interesting game. So let's turn the board around and let's make these moves. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5, and as I always do in those cases, I'm gonna go through the opening part of it real quickly because opening is not part of our interest. Okay, knight d5, e4, knight takes c3, bc, bishop g7, queen a4 check, bishop d7, and queen a3. The idea of this maneuver with the queen, they don't lose really much time because bishop on d7 doesn't stand to that great, and also white delays black's c5 attempt. After queen a3, knight c6, knight f3, e5, bishop e3, e takes d, c takes d, queen e7, queen takes e7, knight takes e7, rook b1, castle for black, bishop c4. White has very strong center and black has slight advantage in development. So f5 was played, and now after e5 black has good game after bishop c6. So white played knight g5, f takes e, and knight f7. Obviously it was prepared at home. This is simple positional sacrifice. White is winning exchange. White is winning exchange, and let's see what black gets for it. Knight f5, they immediately attack the d4 pawn. White castle, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4. There was possibility of playing rook fd1 first, but then after bishop f5, black is doing well here. Bishop takes d4, rook takes d4. And now after rook takes d4, bishop takes d4, and we get position very close to the one we got in the game. Black has two pass pawns on a queen side. They have 3 versus 1. Material deficit is so minimal. It's a bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. Black has a good game, and I will explain you later in the game why this material equivalent is favorable for black. What happened in the game after knight takes d4, white plays bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, knight takes h8, rook takes h8, bishop d5, b5. Now this way white wins back one of the pawns, and now after b5, bishop takes e4 and c5, black has only 1 pawn for exchange. But that was black's idea. Black deliberately went to this position, and they are doing very, very Hello, my name is Roman Jinjihashvili. We continue now with a series on strategy in chess. Today we're going to discuss this subject and a theme that is, in my opinion, one of the most important aspects of a strategy, if not the most important. The reason why I would say it's most important because this can happen in an opening, in a middle game, in the end game. And I'm not talking just regular tactics. Tactics is not a theme. Tactics is a part of the game. But the theme of today's lecture is the breakthrough. When we talk about breakthrough, we have to keep in mind that we are talking about pawn structure and pawn movement. Breakthrough happens normally with pawns. Sometimes it happens with minor pieces, but primarily with pawns. Well, you have closed position and you have to penetrate in your opponent's setup, in your opponent's defense. And often it's not possible by normal means, by just pushing your pieces towards your opponent. You have to open files, you have to break through. Sometimes sacrifice pawn or two and do it that way. So I have a number of examples here to show you and number of games to discuss on any level. And this is very, very important because if you look at it closely and if you think about it, you can find breakthroughs that work or don't work almost in every game. The theme, the ideas of breakthrough, they happen very, very frequently. So let's start with some games. In the beginning, I want to bring you a game that was played on ICC. I brought some of my games, actually a bunch of my games. The reason why, because breakthrough happens so frequently that every chess player has those games. And my games is a lot easier for me to explain. And you don't need their high-tech understanding, and you don't need to be on the highest level. And if you understand what I have to explain now from these games, you will be mastering in this very important part of the strategy. So first I want to bring the game that was played. It's a semi-blitz game, but it's still very typical. E4, C5, knight C3, E6, F4, G6. This is a bad way to play for black because white will have an opportunity to go early D4. You never go G6 and E6 when D4 is possible.